Welcome to TFiR Newsroom. I'm your host, Swapnil Bhartia. Upbound recently launched the first enterprise-grade distribution of open source crossplane, which is called Upbound Universal Crossplane, or UXP. The company also announced the general availability of Upbound Cloud and Upbound Registry products after a year in public preview. To deep dive into these announcements and developments at the company, we have with us once again Bassam Tabbara, founder and CEO of Upbound. Bassam, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Swap. Yeah, really pleasure to be here again.
We have spoken earlier, but it has been quite some time, though last year was more or less like a decade than a year. So let's refresh the memories of our viewers. What is Upbound all about?
So we're the company behind the popular open source project Crossplane. It's a CNCF project that essentially brings the power of using Kubernetes control plane to manage infrastructure at large, especially cloud infrastructure and on-premise infrastructure. And so Upbound is essentially the company behind Crossplane, and we're helping enterprises adopt control planes within their environments and help them essentially, use the powerful techniques that control planes offer to manage their infrastructure, whether it's hybrid infrastructure or multi-cloud or legacy infrastructure from a single control plane, and enable the developers to self-service on it, so they can truly, reach levels of automation that have only been seen in, massive platforms like the cloud providers themselves. So yeah, we've been around for about 3 years. We started the Crossplane project, and as you mentioned, we're this week is a big week for us. We're launching a number of products that help enterprises adopt control planes in their environments and essentially take it to production.
Yeah, we'll get into all these announcements. You recently also said that you see that in the next 10 years or so, we'll see that the real strength of Kubernetes lies more in managing infrastructure and application than just orchestrating containers. So first of all, what indicators do you see? What built this opinion of yours?
Yeah, it's a really, it sounds like a somewhat provocative statement, but I actually I think it's not. It's becoming less and less provocative as the days go by. Essentially, Kubernetes started by being a really powerful container orchestrator, and it reached mainstream by being a really powerful container orchestrator. It won the container orchestration wars, if you remember, in 2017. There was still Mesosphere and all the other orchestrators around, and Kubernetes emerged as a winner. But the true power of the model that kind of Kubernetes pioneered is the fact that you can use this declarative API, you can set configuration, and from that point onwards, human workflows end, and then controllers pick up and run these reconcile loops that can achieve a really high level of automation, whether it's initial deployment or it's scaling acts or growth acts. That was all done in the container space, but it turns out the model of using control planes and declarative API and controllers can apply to essentially all infrastructure management, whether it's cloud, multi-cloud, hybrid. That approach seems to be certainly a lot more applicable than just the container ecosystem. And so we saw that early on. Honestly, that was the genesis of creating Upbound the company. It was also the genesis of creating the Crossplane project. We wanted to bring that approach of using control planes to manage, infrastructure to enterprises. And so, we're seeing a lot of adoption of this approach in the community at large. You're seeing so many people extending the control plane approach around Kubernetes to the point where we think, going forward, if you look at, if we predict 10 years from now, or even 5 years from now, you'd look back and say, hey, remember when Kubernetes was just about managing containers? And that would be essentially a historical thing at this point. That approach is going to be the dominant approach. We see it even replacing, infrastructure as code tooling, because it just brings a lot more much higher degree of automation than we are able to achieve in the past. So that's kind of the thing that gets us excited about what we're doing at Upbound and what we're doing in the Crossplane community.
I want to know a bit more about, what does Crossplane do and how does it work?
Yeah, so if you've used Kubernetes today, you're used to, using kubectl, you apply changes that you want to make in the cluster, and then Kubernetes takes over and runs your pods and containers and scales them and manages all the infrastructure for you, right? And the ecosystem is so powerful around Kubernetes that there are all this tooling, whether it's GitOps and CI/CD and all the different tools that people are used to today and have using in their day-to-day operations, right? If you install Crossplane in your Kubernetes cluster, you get to use that same approach that you're used to and all the tooling that you're used to not only manage containers, but you can now actually manage cloud infrastructure as well. For example, you could actually, with Crossplane, use your kubectl tooling and everything else around it to deploy database instances in Amazon or in Google or in Azure. You can use it to connect it up to VMs, whether it's running on-premise or running in the cloud, EC2 instances or Google VM instances. All of those things can become part of the flow, the workflow, the pipelines that you're used to, and essentially organizing teams around using Crossplane. So Crossplane you can think of as bringing the power of the Kubernetes model to everything else, not just containers, to literally the entire surface area of what people want to manage, whether it's in cloud or on premises or in hybrid and multi-cloud environments.
Right. Crossplane is an open source project, and it's a sandbox at CNCF. Interesting thing about CNCF is that even if you look at whether sandboxing or incubation or graduation, most of these projects are already used in production. So what I want to understand from you that what does sandboxing really mean for the project, for the community? How does it help, to gain momentum? So let's look at it's getting sandboxed from the perspective of Upbound, from the perspective of the ecosystem players, because a neutral foundation, they can easily, people don't have to worry about a company controlling it. And from the perspective of users that, hey, you know what, this is there, we can safely use it.
Yeah, I mean, the CNCF does a really good job in terms of trying to vet projects and make sure that there's a criteria defined so that when end users adopt them, they understand what they're getting into. Crossplane obviously started as a sandbox project. It's actually in the process currently of moving to incubation. So I believe the public vote will actually happen in the next few days, if not sooner. And the criteria to go to incubation is essentially around end user adoption. Are people, to your point, are people adopting it in production? The beauty of something like critical technology like Crossplane is that you tend to see early adoption, and then it leads into larger adoption. I can tell you, just going through the process of taking Crossplane to incubation stage, the folks at the CNCF Technical Oversight Committee have been interviewing people that are running Crossplane in production, and ensuring that they understand the value and what the deployments look like. And there are Fortune 100 to Fortune 2000 companies that have massive deployments of Crossplane today in production, and using it to orchestrate, essentially, large pieces of their environments and infrastructure, which is what made us confident that we should take it to the incubation stage. It's also why we, are, with all this demand from the enterprise to actually, put it in production, it's why they are looking for a vendor to help them, with their production deployments. 2 days ago, we released the first enterprise-grade, production-ready distribution of Crossplane that's backed by Upbound, right? So that, as you know, every open source project, for it to reach mainstream, there has to be a set of vendors around it, and we're glad to be the first one around Crossplane, and I'm sure there'll be more, but given how popular the project is, but as of today, we are able to help, despite the, whether it's incubation or it's sandbox, we're able to help enterprises actually adopt it in production environments, and we're able to kind of support them and make sure that they are, reduce their time to market and ensure that they're successful with their deployment.
So let's talk about Upbound Universal Crossplane. Of course, it is based on the Crossplane project. How close you will keep it to the upstream, number one. Number two is that how users who have tested Crossplane, the project from CNCF that they have downloaded from GitHub, they can move to it. And the third part is that what does your roadmap look for UXP?
Yeah, so I'll start with the second one. It's literally one command to in-place upgrade Crossplane to UXP. Super simple. We have a really easy process to do that with our with the Upbound CLI. It truly looks like a single command. We're keeping the project super close in the sense that there's the downstream version, UXP, will be kept fairly close to the upstream version. There is a lag, probably around one release lag, so that we're able to actually ensure that patches and support and long-term support, we have ample time to test and make sure that we can vet all changes. But our plan is not to keep a fork. Instead, it's to push all the changes back upstream. And if there's any kind of the lag, it's temporary. It's not something that we think is permanent. And then the last part, I think, we think that enterprises are ready to deploy this. We have customers running UXP. We have people. We having a vendor that can support this today actually unblocks many people. A lot of people don't want to take a dependency on a project and then hire two engineers to actually work on that project. They want to get to the things that matter to their business, and that's the part that I think is super interesting with what we're doing with UXP. In terms of our roadmap, we're building a number of things that are around control planes, whether it's making it easy for people to deploy control planes, making it easier for people to create configurations around, and the developer experience around creating configurations, policy, observability, cost estimation, chargeback, and migration from infrastructure as code tooling. Those are all on our roadmap. And in fact, one of the things that we're super proud of is that every instance of UXP can connect to Upbound Cloud, which gives you really amazing features around being able to understand what's happening in every Crossplane cluster, being able to apply common policy and collaborate with with your colleagues on implementing policy and changes in a uniform way, and providing a single pane of glass for the entire environment that you're managing. And so those features require both a cloud service as well as software that's running on house, and as a result, we're building that feature set on the as part of the Upbound product offerings.
Since you already mentioned Upbound Cloud, I want to talk about it. But before that, I also want to, since you mentioned there are already people who are using UXP. Of course, there are certain names that you cannot take, but if you can just share what kind of use cases where it makes a lot of sense, where you see a lot of deployments.
I won't mention exact names but I'll tell you, we're seeing two predominant use cases right now. We're seeing companies that are all in on Kubernetes and want to extend what they're managing through GitOps and CI/CD pipelines and the tooling that they've built around this and the teams that they've organized around this, more importantly. And we see those folks wanting to bring in cloud infrastructure into the exact same tooling and workflows that they've set up. So think Fortune 2000 companies that are essentially extending what they're doing in that model to include infrastructure they're managing in AWS, or infrastructure they're managing in Azure, or infrastructure they're managing in Google. That's one scenario that we see adoption with. And then the other scenario, the use case that we're seeing a fair amount of traction on, is folks that are moving off of infrastructure as code tooling and replacing large swaths of, whether it's Terraform or other approaches that they're doing around infrastructure as code tooling, and normalizing on, the Kubernetes API style management of their infrastructure. And we see a number of customers that are in that category, and literally, recognizing that the industry is moving off, infrastructure as code tooling, and being early adopters of that approach, but also seeing that that is the way forward. So that those are the two use cases that we are seeing. Super exciting, because it's awesome to be in essentially in a time in the industry where we're actually, it looks like there's a new era of automation coming in, and we feel like with Crossplane and what we're doing around Upbound, we feel like we're at the center of it right now.
No, very true. I'll just switch from this announcement to the two that I want to talk about, exciting ones, which is Upbound Cloud and Upbound Registry. They have moved to GA from being in beta for a while. So tell us a bit about these two projects. And as you're talking about the role Upbound is going to play in this cloud native space, where do the Upbound Cloud, Upbound Registry, and UXP fit not only in your story but the wider cloud native story?
Yeah, so we see Upbound. We started Upbound Cloud. It went to preview about a year ago, and we've been working with the community and working with customers to refine it, and, understand the use cases, and as of 2 days ago, we announced the general availability of Upbound Cloud. The idea behind Upbound Cloud is that it becomes the single point of control for all application and infrastructure. So we imagine a world where a platform engineer goes to Upbound Cloud and can see the entire surface area of all infrastructure and applications that's under their control. Right? So they're able to work with the colleagues in terms of understanding who's using what infrastructure in what cloud provider, or what's happening on premise. They're able to look at configurations of whether it's large scale application deployments or even smaller ones, and able to see the entire surface area, understand cost, understand security, understand get observability, and understand what things are up and down. That's the design point for Upbound Cloud. And so whether you're connecting to clusters that you're managing yourself, or we offer the ability to actually host clusters if you don't want to manage them. And so truly a single and complete offering that we're going for. Obviously, this is the first GA release, and with our roadmap, we're adding a lot of more interesting things that you'll see coming down the road here. And then the other thing is Upbound Registry. We think of the registry as essentially a community library. As people build interesting configurations on top of Crossplane, they want to share them. They want to collaborate on them, whether it's in the public, or within an organization. We see the registry as being the hub for Crossplane, and it's a free offering. We have a number of reference platforms that are in there, including providers, and we see people essentially, coalescing around the idea of using control planes around the registry. And both are generally available. They all work seamlessly together. If you have UXP, it automatically connects up to Upbound Cloud, and it connects to the registry. It's truly all the products work in an integrated fashion, which is the experience that we're trying to offer the enterprise, because nobody wants to mess with setting all this stuff up and trying to figure out how to deal with all this stuff. They've got other things to worry about.
Since initially you were talking about how you see Kubernetes is going to play a much bigger role in managing more things than just orchestrating containers, we are also seeing a kind of evolution of roles, like from developers to DevOps, to DevSecOps to SREs. And this may be out of context, but we also talk about edge use case, which is edge data centers, edge cloud, not IoT, which means that managing those edge devices at the edge, you will have to know more about hardware as well. So will hardware also move into the pipeline of a developer? How do you see the evolution of not just the technology part, but the cultural side as well?
Yeah, the cultural side that we're observing, is that we see companies structuring around platform and platform teams. These are the teams that are responsible for, owning cloud accounts and understanding the environments and implementing business policies, whether it's cost control or security or compliance or governance, right? And they're also responsible for creating a self-service development experience for the hundreds and maybe even thousands of developers within their organization, right? And so the shift is from DevOps, where you imagine the idea behind DevOps is that developers can build software, application software, but they can also have cloud credentials and self-service on the cloud directly. That is becoming an anti-pattern in enterprises today. In fact, most of our customers today have central platform teams that are responsible for being the layer between developers and cloud, and building a layer. And you see Kubernetes there in that pattern. So we essentially, Upbound as a company, we tailor our product offerings to these platform engineers that are building these what look like internal cloud platforms that layer on top of cloud, offer a self-service experience to developers, and create an abstraction that hides a lot of the complexity that developers don't want to manage in terms of infrastructure. And so whether that applies to cloud providers, whether running in public clouds or on-premise infrastructure or edge, like the folks that are running on edge are also trying to manage that using a common workflow and a common set of tools that they're used to manage deployments, whether that goes to, say, public regions in AWS or Google or Azure, or it goes to edge locations that they're running Kubernetes on, or to deploy. We see all of that still being managed centrally from a platform team, and creating abstractions that help developers not have to understand and worry about the variance and the changes within each of these infrastructure environments.
Bassam, thank you so much for taking time out today and talk about not only how you have a theory about what we'll see, the evolution of Kubernetes, but also how you're putting that theory in practicality and with this product and open source projects that you announced. And as I said earlier, I love talking to you, so I would love to have you back on the show. But thank you for today.
Thank you so much, Swap. Always a pleasure to be on the show. Thanks.